Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan battle video. In this video we are going to take a look at the fusion category SBR and how we can beat it entirely free to play. So it's been a while since I posted the free to play challenge video. Just been kind of busy covering a bit of legends as well. Also really there's been quite a few free to play units and their easy A's, and just been experimenting with some other content as well. But yes, so we're back with another free to play challenge. Before we get into any big kind of discussion or details, essentially the lineups here is we're going to have a friend tech LR Goku and Vegeta unit. They are the best option. I tried the strength Gogeta and I tried the physical Gogeta. The tech one is the best one, mainly because of the extreme reduction in damage that they take. They take like almost no damage, which is fantastic, and that really helps out. Then they are going to be linked up with the Int Go Tanks and Ghost unit, and then on the other rotation we are going to have the physical Yamhan linked up with the strength Goten Kid, which is a strange combination to say the least, but they do manage to get the job done. The biggest issue with Fusion is it's got some pretty bad options, and we'll talk about that now, but there are some very notable weaknesses in the team itself. In terms of this stage, another thing that's very important to take note is that the units have quite a large amount of health. They actually have a pretty sizable amount of health. They have quite large health pools, and so you do need to do quite sensible amounts of damage, otherwise you're going to end up struggling once again. So that's something I would like to point out. Obviously, remember guys, we are doing a free to play challenge. It is always advisable to use as many summonable units as possible, and this is more a way to see A, if it's possible, and B, if there are any benefits in using some of these units. And some of these units are pretty solid, starting with which the From Father to Son Goten Kid, an incredibly solid option with 150% attack and defense, has an additional attack and defense of 50%, has key +5 in all allies attack and defense at 10%, and chance of performing a critical hit of 10% when there's an ally whose name includes Goku Angel or Trunks Kid attacking in the same turn. Now you can use that in conjunction with the Goku Angel unit, I believe. The tech unit, I think, counts. I'm not entirely certain. I'd have to be very careful about that. Sometimes it does count, sometimes it doesn't. But there is a Goku Angel, so you could link them up. But due to the fact, so you should always link up Goten and the tech Goku and Vegeta if possible. Only reason I didn't do it is because the tech Gogeta, to be entirely honest with you, needs to be out as long as possible. So shifting him on rotation is not good, and we just managed to get really good starting rotations in the sense that a lot of them were pretty set up to what we wanted. And so rather to go with that than to kind of change things up and risk losing a turn of DPS from either Goten or from the Goku and Vegeta Angel unit. So that's the only reason I did not do that. Then obviously we have Yamhan, a pretty decent unit, sharing the limit with Goten, which is why they have a key. And he is greatly raises attack for one turn, has attack and defense of 180% with an additional attack of 80%, and launches an additional attack which has a medium chance of becoming a super attack. He also lowers enemies attack, which is pretty good, and when performing a super attack when HP is 80% or less, he also has an additional 80% attack and key +6 with a high chance of performing a critical hit when 80% is less once only. So the nice thing about Yamhan is that you very often get below the 80% mark and you can see him really pop off for some big damage. He can get multiple crit supers, 3 of them. He can do a lot of good work, so it is highly suggested that you do take him. He can do some really big damage. Be aware that his defense is not the world's best. It's pretty standard, but he does lower enemies' attack, which is pretty solid, and it does help out quite a bit. Here you can kind of see he did some good damage. Almost eliminating Babidi on his own would have been great if he had, because then obviously we could have had Goten do a little bit of damage on someone else, but pretty good start. You want to try and focus on eliminating at least Babidi early on, or Hoi early on, one of those two. They have a lot less health than Dabura and Yakon, and by focusing and getting rid of them, you can kind of reduce the risk of taking super attacks. Also, obviously, Go Tanks and Ghost are a fantastic unit that, I think people use for even like standard fusion SBR teams. He's just really, really solid. The healing that he brings on his orbs, 10,000 HP. He also has the ability to stun as well. That high chance of stunning, greatly raising attack and defense. Just very, very good. Basically, in terms of his overall kind of performance, which I think is very solid. I personally use him to stun risk units, and you'll see that a lot in the final phase, making sure that we stun the physical Boo in that stage, because that's kind of where we're at a big risk. You also see I stun Yakon here, and so obviously stunning Yakon is just to prevent his chance of damaging Yamhan. Also, just he has a bit more health, so I planned on getting rid of Dabura early on into the next turn. Obviously with the tech Goku and Vegeta Angel unit. Generally speaking, you just need to be very strategic about where you place the stuns. Try and focus on high risk units, or ideally units that if they were to super attack or were to attack would cause a lot more damage. Like for example, if I have the strength Gogeta in the final rotation and I can stun Dabura before he potentially attacks him, that's going to be something that I want to do. Now, the big weaknesses here are 3 units, and they are very bad, and they are very much a big weakness. The first is the strength Gogeta. He has attack and defense at 77%, which is okay. He also has an additional attack and defense of 20% when there's a Goku's category ally on the team, and when there's a Vegeta's category ally on the team. The nice thing is we do manage to get this done with Goten, but overall he's just not too great, realistically speaking. He's just a bit low on the defensive side, and realistically he's just nothing too remarkable. He's okay. Out of the 3 I'm about to talk about, he's okay, but the rest are really bad. Veku is horrid, absolutely shocking. He can do okay-ish damage because of his medium chance to crit, and he does clutch out 1 or 2 crits for us, but realistically his defense takes so long to build up. He only has 50% defense as well. His defense takes so long to build up, and his evasion, that using him is just not feasible. He's really bad. Like, he's really, really bad, which doesn't really help a lot. Like, his damage is nothing remarkable, and he himself can take so much damage that it's very questionable to use him. But I literally used every single free-to-play fusion character in this team build, so I had no other options left in any way, shape or form. Then we have the Int Go Tanks, not to be confused with Go Tanks and Ghost. This guy also just nothing too crazy. He does have an easy A, but it's not out yet on global, which would significantly make this a lot easier, like way easier, but he's just very bad in his current state. Attack and defense at 90% when performing a super attack means essentially we only want to stick him, in the final slot. He launches an additional attack that has a medium chance of being a super attack when we face only one enemy. That's somewhat useful, but not really. Then he gains an additional attack and defense of 40% when the target is in defense down status. This isn't so bad. Overall, he's not terrible, and honestly, I probably rate him the second worst out of the trio of Veku, him, and Gogeta. But realistically, he isn't like spectacular. Now, obviously, this whole team build was obviously free to play, Out of all of the units that I would talk about, I would probably say Go Tanks and Ghost are pretty usable. I would say Strength Goten could definitely be usable, especially if you have a full fusion level lead. And then I would say Yamahan could also possibly be discussed as being a very usable unit for an actual fusion team to take on this stage and the ESBR. Obviously, just to discuss the leads for a second, there are quite a few leads for the fusion category. Now, Tech Gogeta is not necessarily a fusion lead, but he is a time limit lead, which basically encompasses like almost all of the fusion category units, and it does encompass all of these units here. Now, Tech Gogeta was the best by far. His transformation was great when we could get it, even though I don't actually get it in this video. I think I get it in the first fight, and that would recover some health, and he does some very good damage. But in his base form, the damage reduction, the ability of creating rainbow key spheres, and just in like the general tankiness of the unit comes in clutch. The additional super attacks also help with the ability to do damage, especially if you manage to get a rainbow 100% lead friend like I do. It does really help, especially with this final phase where you're facing two quite tanky, strong units, and so having the AGL, Kid Buu kind of be solo taken out by Tech Gogeta is pretty strong. Then in terms of everything else, so obviously something just important to take note of, the physical fusion Gogeta, honestly, not really a unit that I would say is one that I particularly want to utilize. They're a little bit ancient. The main thing is they've got great raw stats and they can do some decent damage, but their big issue ultimately at the end of the day is that unfortunately running under a weaker lead, like the 77% of Go Tanks, greatly reduces their ability to tank due to the reduction of their raw stats. Now, the damage reduction that exists on Tech Gogeta just makes them a lot stronger overall. Then you get the AGL Gogeta. Honestly, not too bad, just kind of a more offensive orientated version of the Tech Gogeta. I did try him and he came very close because obviously the transformation makes him do some pretty huge damage, which is one of the big issues we have on this team. But I think overall the general tankiness of the Tech Gogeta was a lot better. Then finally we have the strength, Super Saiyan God SS Gogeta, who's just not good enough on the lower stats. His defense is really, really bad, and the offense just takes far too long to get going compared to pretty much any of the other units, like in their entirety. So yeah, for me, definitely 100%. I think this was the best team build that I could do. It's the only team build you can technically do free to play. There are some World Tournament units, but as you guys know, I don't count World Tournament units as free to play because, quite frankly, there's still a lot of luck that's required to pull a free to play unit comparatively to, someone who, someone might have all the World Tournament units rainbowed and you might not. So that's something that just doesn't really count into free to play, at least for me. But that's it from me, guys. Obviously, we managed to get it done. Was probably the toughest free-to-play challenge run so far, if I'm entirely honest. The damage just really struggled the whole way through. But yeah, it was pretty good, and in the end, we got it done. But that's it from me, guys. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!